Welcome to Shattered Reality with your hosts Kate Valentine and Fahrusha. Prepare to have your paradigms shifted and your truths questioned. And now, Shattered Reality.
Well, here we are again, Fahrusha.
Hey, Kate, it's really great to see you and hear you one more time here.
And you certainly picked out a very interesting guest today.
Why, thank you. But I want to say that today is May 10th, 2016.
Okay.
All right. And our guest, I guess I'll introduce him.
Okay, but there's nothing supernatural about May 10th. It just happens to be May 10th.
I like to slate.
I see.
It's like my experience in the commercial field. You always slate who you are, and then they say which take it is.
I
and
see.
So forth like that. But we only have one take. We don't have one.
No. This is live.
This is it. This is the way it is. In any case, we have a very, very interesting guest for you today on a topic that we haven't even come close to covering before, partially because I didn't even know exactly that it existed.
No, I didn't either.
I'm going to say like a couple of things that we all know about Mexico. Have you ever been to Mexico, Kate?
Never want to go.
I have been to Mexico numerous times. And I have gotten these little Day of the Dead figures.
Yeah, it just freaks me out.
Freaks you out? You scared of those things?
Not scared. It's just disgusting. I just don't like it. The whole thing is just... Ugh. But, I mean, but that is my take. And, obviously other people take it differently.
Well, I find the sculptures very interesting. And I have a couple of them in my house.
Really?
And one of them is a little guy on a motorcycle, a skeleton on a motorcycle. And I think he's funny and cute. And I never want to get on a motorcycle. I am afraid of motorcycles.
You know the percentage on that? In 5 years, it's 100% sure you're going to have a major accident.
Yeah, well,
That's the statistics.
I'm afraid of motorcycles.
Does your skeleton have like a little bobblehead as it goes along?
No, it doesn't.
Oh,
the motorcycle doesn't even roll, Kate. It doesn't even roll.
Oh, okay.
In any case.
Little helmet?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I have to think about that. No, I don't think he does. But in any case, when I saw the bride skeleton, I always just thought it was another Day of the Dead skeleton. And I have even been in Botanicas in New York City where I have seen candles with the skeleton bride. And I just thought it was some Day of the Dead thing. But when I discovered our guest, I discovered him through the Morbid Anatomy Museum in Brooklyn.
That's
that
a
he was
fascinating place. That's great.
Yeah.
That's good.
That he was going to be a guest, and I think he's going to be a guest in the future there shortly. And I had to get in touch with him because it was such a fascinating subject. So, without any further ado, I want to introduce the Bishop Walter F. Sullivan Chair in Catholic Studies and Professor of Religious Studies at Virginia Commonwealth University, Mr. Andrew Chesnut, and his book, Devoted to Death, Santa Muerte, the Skeleton Saint. Welcome, Andrew.
Yes,
thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And let me also say that the great significance of this date of May 10th is that in Mexico, it's actually Mother's Day.
Get out, really?
And so my wife is Mexican, and my mother-in-law, of course, is Mexican. So I had to do Mother's Day 2.0 today.
That's great.
Boy. Well, we're both mothers, and so we're very happy to celebrate Mexican Mother's Day with your wife and your mother-in-law. I wish them a very happy Mother's Day for us.
Muchas gracias.
But see, maybe that was a little bit of psychic thinking, Fahrusha.
Maybe so.
Yeah, maybe. Because I usually don't mention the date. But, well, thank you. And again, Dr. Chesnut, I have to confess my ignorance, and I didn't realize the significance of Santa Muerte. And very fascinating, really.
As a person who is a chair of Catholic studies, and now knowing what I do know, that the Catholic Church isn't really very excited about this worship of Santa Muerte.
No. In fact, so much so that when Pope Francis was in Mexico back in February, he actually condemned Santa Muerte basically as a patron saint of narcos, of the drug cartels in Mexico. But the problem for the Catholic Church is that the great majority of devotees of Santa Muerte, or Saint Death in English, still identify as Catholics.
I see. Well, how exactly did you come to be so fascinated with this cult figure? I say that with respect in the sense that, when I mean cult figure, it just means to me not as a negative, but more or less a kind of some new sort of
sort of a
worship.
subspecies of
Yes, I'm a specialist in Latin American religion, and so I was about 2 years into research for what I thought would be my third book on the most important representation of the Virgin Mary in the entire world, and that's Mexico's Virgin of Guadalupe.
Love it.
But I just didn't find the same type of motivation and passion that had buoyed my previous research. And in that context of kind of research malaise, in March 2009, I saw the news that the Mexican army had moved in with bulldozers and backhoes to demolish some 40 Santa Muerte shrines on the Texas-Mexico and California-Mexico border. Now, I've been going to Mexico for over 30 years. First time, I think, was in 1983. So I was familiar with Santa Muerte, but I really wasn't aware that she had become kind of spiritual enemy number one for the Mexican government in their ongoing war against the drug cartels until I saw that news that the Mexican army had actually razed 40 of her shrines.
Wow.
So that was really the catalyst that sparked my initial interest. I consulted with colleagues, friends, family, and after a couple of weeks, I decided to temporarily turn my back on the Guadalupe project and plunge into this project on Santa Muerte with the goal of publishing the first book in English. And still 4 years later, after it was published, it remains the sole academic book in English on what is now the fastest growing new religious movement in the entire Western Hemisphere.
Amazing.
From Canada to Chile, no other new religious movement is growing as fast as the cult of Santa Muerte.
Okay. Wow, that is just an amazing thing, isn't it, Kate?
Yeah. Well, what exactly? Usually, any religious cult or subcult will offer something. What is the draw to Santa? What are people seeking with this?
That's an excellent question. There's multiple draws, but I think the most important thing is that she has a reputation as a very speedy and efficacious miracle worker. And that, a lot of the Catholic saints tend to specialize in just one type of miracle or two at most.
Right.
But Santa Muerte, in kind of the spirit of the times, is a multitasking miracle worker. Yeah. She's an agent of prosperity. She's a curandera or healer. She is she's also the Black Santa Muerte of acts of vengeance and revenge. And she's also an agent of law and justice, which would be her green votive candle. And so it's kind of that multitasking, miracle working persona that's a great attraction. But at the same time, since she does represent death, she's proliferated in Mexico, unfortunately, during a time of great death and dying, in which some 100,000 Mexicans have been killed since 2006 in the ongoing drug violence that's plaguing the country. And so, ironically, a lot of devotees actually look to this saint of death for more grains of life in the hourglass of life that she holds.
Interesting. I had another question to bring things back a little bit to the Virgin of Guadalupe. I did make a visit to the shrine of Guadalupe outside Mexico City, I guess it is. Is it in the actual environs of Mexico City, or is it
It
just...
is, yes,
It is.
it
It
is.
seems like a little bit on the outskirts.
It is on the outskirts, yeah.
And I did go there, and I was incredibly impressed by the people coming from across Central America, some of whom traveled the entire trip on their knees. Because they wanted to make this pilgrimage to the Virgin of Guadalupe. And I am drawn to equating the Virgin of Guadalupe with the Corn Maiden, as opposed to the Mother Mary. I'm not saying that it's not both things at once, but I sort of have the feeling of something older still. And by the same token, I understand that there is a correspondence to a Mayan or Aztec goddess of death with Santa Muerte.
Right. Going back to Virgin of Guadalupe, there's actually a correspondence to an Aztec goddess called Tonantzin. In fact, at the very site that you visited, at the hill of Tepeyac, was exactly where the Aztec goddess Tonantzin, which coincidentally means our mother, was worshipped by the Aztecs. And so there are many who argue that actually the Virgin Guadalupe is a type of syncretism with the Aztec goddess Tonantzin, our mother.
Yes.
Yes, and also that holds true for Santa Muerte. There's definitely a correspondence with certain Mayan and Aztec death deities, and probably the closest correspondence is with the Aztec female, the death goddess known as Mictecacihuatl.
Now, I can't say that, Andrew.
Yeah.
I read that. And would you just say that once again
Yeah,
slowly?
It sounded great.
Mictecacihuatl.
Sounds Klingon.
Yeah, I think maybe they are from space somewhere. Now, I had noticed the correspondence between Guadalupe and the Corn Maiden, which is a Native American deity that a friend of mine made a mask of. And so I guess that many of these things have, are more, what's the word I'm looking, not prototypes.
Prototypes. Probably, yeah.
There was what does Jung call them? Archetypes. Archetypes are exactly the word I was looking for.
Right.
And what do you think about the idea that once we worship something as human beings, that a kind of a group energy could form a sort of tulpa-like character? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But if you don't, please, I'll explain.
Yeah. Why don't you explain what you mean?
In Tibetan mysticism, it's possible to meditate on a being that doesn't yet exist. And I might be slightly off on this, but you actually, with your mind, create a physical being. You can create like a man in black, or you can create a shadow person with your brain, more or less, with your mind, maybe not your brain, but your consciousness. And I think that if you have a group of persons that decide to worship an archetype, you can sort of bring that archetype to life and make it like a tulpa. The tulpa is the Tibetan being that is brought into being by someone's meditation. So I was just using that as an example. As an example,
Right,
yes.
Right. Yeah, I think one of the really interesting things about Santa Muerte is that she's clearly the result of religious syncretism or fusion between the Grim Reaperess, because in Spain, our Western European Grim Reaper more often was represented as the female Grim Reaperess, called La Parca in Spanish. So the Spanish Catholic Church brings over the figure of the Grim Reaperess as a tool for evangelization of the indigenous people in Mexico and throughout the Americas. And there's no doubt that the indigenous people, of course, already have their own death deities. And while in Europe, the figure of the Grim Reaper had never been a supernatural figure, only a mere representation or personification of death, which actually emerged out of the Black Plague of the 14th century, which sent about 1/3 of Europeans to an early grave.
Yes.
So it's clear that some of the indigenous people in Mexico, Guatemala, Argentina, and Paraguay kind of take the figure of the Spanish Grim Reaperess to be a holy miracle working figure because they already have their own religious, cultural context of having death deities. And so what had simply been a personification of death for the Western Europeans morphs into this supernatural miracle working figure that we know as Santa Muerte. And so there's a lot of Mexicans who like to say, oh no, she is kind of the latest incarnation, if you will, or manifestation of the Aztec goddess Mictecacihuatl. But you can't ignore the role of Spain. Without the Spanish medieval Catholic Church coming over with their figure of the Grim Reapers, there is no Santa Muerte in Mexico, or the U.S. for that matter.
Right. And of course, in Spanish, the word for death, muerte, is female, yes?
Yes, in all the Romance language, it's female. However, we can't take that too far because Santa Muerte has two male cousins, one in Argentina, and his name is Santa Muerte, and another in Guatemala who's called Rey Pascual, or King Pascual, and those two skeleton saints are actually male, unlike female Santa Muerte. So, yes, it is female. La Muerte, or death, is female in Spanish, but that didn't influence the fact that two of the three skeletal saints, or death saints, in the Americas are actually male.
I have, at this point, I think we usually save questions from listeners for the end. However, I think it's an appropriate time to make mention of this question from our listener, Roxanne, who has been on the show. And it's because it's something that had come to my mind as well. Do you believe that the popularity of this saint has to do to some extent with not only the deaths from the drug war, but the problems of ecology that are out there going on?
You mean like the planet's dying, so they worship death?
Yes.
Oh.
I
think
less directly, because the violence is so horrific in Mexico that most people are looking for very immediate solutions, and death and contamination due to environmental factors is usually kind of a slower and less acute problem than, hey, maybe there's this drug cartel around the corner who might kill me at any moment. So,
yes.
So yeah, I mean, that could be relevant, but I don't think it's as relevant as the horrific ongoing drug war that's just kind of engulfed Mexico.
And all those students, those university students that went missing.
The 43 university students as well. Exactly. Yeah. It's just been 10 years of just horrific violence, and a lot of people had hope with the current president coming in a few years ago, but the violence just continues unabated.
So your book has the chapters divided up by the different color of the candles that could be lit in devotion to Santa Muerte. Do you want to speak to that?
In studying and researching it, it just became kind of a natural, organic, organizational framework for my book. The fact that really the most important kind of paraphernalia of devotion for Santa Muerte are these colored votive candles. And particularly in economies of scarcity. In Mexico, these candles usually only cost between these jar candles only cost between $1 and $2. So if you can't afford a $50 or $100 statue, you probably can scrape together enough cash to buy one of the votive candles. And so, yeah, there's a whole series of different colors, and they each symbolize a major theme in the cult. For example, I found that the #1 selling colored votive candle in Mexico is the red candle, not of blood and murder, but the red candle of love and passion. And indeed, what we know Santa Muerte has been doing for the longest time in Mexico, going back to the field notes of Mexican and American anthropologists going back to the 1940s, is love magic, love sorcery, particularly for aggrieved Mexican women who believe that their husbands or boyfriends are cheating on them. And indeed, the oldest known prayer to Santa Muerte is a prayer to ask the cheating husband to come back humbled at the devotee's knees and to take out the other woman from his path. And in fact, that's what I'll be speaking about at Morbid Anatomy on May 30th about Santa Muerte, the love sorceress.
And you thought they were worried about the ecology.
Right. Another popular candle is the gold candle, symbolizing prosperity and abundance. And indeed, a lot of small businesses throughout Mexico that don't necessarily sell Santa Muerte products will have a little in-store altar to Santa Muerte as a way to grow and prosper their business. So she's also kind of a strong agent of prosperity, and there's this kind of really strong current of prosperity theology in the cult that somewhat mirrors what you see in evangelical Christianity in our country as well. Another candle I think about is the green candle of both law and justice. And this is really important in Mexico, where Santa Muerte has basically become the patron saint of the Mexican penal system. Not only of prisoners locked up, mostly on drug crimes, but even prison guards. In fact, my nephew in the western state of Michoacan is a prison guard who estimates that about a quarter of his fellow prison guards are devotees of Santa Muerte.
Amazing, amazing.
So that's sort of an interesting side note on human psychology, too. The #1 thing is love, marriage, and so on. And then secondly, money. And third, justice. That's sort of, that actually sort of sums up most of the legal codes in most countries.
Right.
Yeah, it does.
But
Exactly.
the black candle.
Exactly.
Oh.
And you know, she's particularly important also as a supernatural advocate or attorney, because the judicial system in Mexico is so dysfunctional,
Yes,
right.
that a lot of people think that their only help can come from the supernatural.
They're probably right, too.
Right.
Well,
There's a black candle?
there is a black
Yes.
candle.
Oh, that
Yes.
doesn't sound good.
Yes, there's the black candle, which is both for protection from black magic, or for those who might want to come against you, but also for works of harm, injury, and vengeance against others. And indeed, because she is a folk saint and not a canonized Catholic saint, she is open to those type of petitions. I think there's a fair amount of Mexicans who find it easier to bring those type of, perhaps from the Christian perspective, kind of morally dubious petitions to her than they might want to bring to Catholic saints. Not saying that they don't do it. I know they do it, but probably more frequently to Santa Muerte, since at the end of the day, she's not Christian.
Right, and it's sort of like going to your mom, too, as opposed to going to the church. You know, like, I know it's not right, but I'd really like to settle this matter, so can't you take care of it for me?
Exactly.
It seems like a very informal sort of...
Exactly, and I'm so glad you mentioned Mother, because for a lot of devotees, she kind of plays that role of a maternal figure. And I've even heard women say, you know, I lost my mother, but I still have Santa Muerte.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that was something that really surprised me when I started my research. I had no idea that she was this kind of maternal figure akin to the Virgin Guadalupe.
Yeah.
And she has a lot of epithets, like the pretty girl,
Oh, right, hundreds. But yeah, some of the most popular translating into English would be the white girl. Of course, she's bones, right? So the white girl, the pretty girl, the skinny girl, the bald lady, the powerful lady, the lady of the shadows.
Interesting, interesting. And just as many people of the Catholic faith dress up the infant of Prague, I guess. They have dolls of the Christ child as a toddler or something, and they just seem to dress him up. I understand that the Mexican devotees also dress up the statues of Santa Muerte with all kinds of things.
Exactly. In fact, the most famous effigy of Santa Muerte, which is one of the most notorious barrios of Mexico City, called Tepito. Actually, that's where the cult really emerges in public form in the first time in 2001. Every first of the month, Santa Muerte gets a wardrobe change, and here kind of, I mean that's a good analogy you made with the Holy Child of Prague, or actually we have in New Mexico we have the Holy Child of Atocha close to Santa Fe. But the more direct correlation in Mexico is the way they dress up the various representation of the Virgin, most importantly Guadalupe. So yeah. In fact, there's a bunch of small businesses in Mexico City that cater exclusively to dressing up effigies of Santa Muerte. It's become a thriving business because now there's millions of devotees, and Mexicans are really big on dress and colors and such. So that's become an important kind of small business, particularly in Mexico City.
And the bridal outfit, how did that emerge?
I don't know when that first emerged, but yeah, dressing her as the bride who's eternally waiting for the perfect groom who never shows up and sometimes a sexy bride as well. I mean, the last few years I've seen the sexy Santa Muerte as well. So yeah, the bride in waiting. I don't know when that first emerges, but yeah, that's one of the more popular ways to represent her. In fact, there's even a temple in Los Angeles that offers temporary 6-month wedding to Santa Muerte for male devotees.
I have, in my limited research on the subject before the interview, I saw a number of tattoos mostly on men of Santa Muerte, with some of them skeletal and others looking like sort of a very beautiful but gaunt woman. So there are a lot of things going on in this worship of Santa Muerte.
Oh yeah, the tattoos are so important because it's kind of seen as the ultimate. You're giving her a piece of your personal real estate, and so the tattoos are usually made as part of a vow to Santa Muerte. You know, Santa Muerte, if you come through and give me that new job that I'm offered, then I promise I'll tattoo you on my back. So yeah, that's really, really important. And again, in Mexican prisons, the number one tattoo is the Bony Lady.
Interesting. I think on the very maximum security prisons in the United States, there are tattoos born to lose. Isn't that the case, Kate?
I think so,
like serial killers tend to have that tattooed on their body somewhere, born to lose. In any case, given that we here at Shattered Reality are something of a paranormal podcast, working with a lot of different phenomena that occurs in the world, could you give us some form of an account of something sort of paranormal that you have found in your research that Santa Muerte has delivered?
Yeah, sure. I never forget kind of one of the most compelling stories I was told early on in my research. This must have been summer 2010 when I was interviewing a lot of devotees at the famous shrine in Tepito in Mexico City. I met a young goth-looking teen girl, probably 18 or 19, and I said, well, is there any particularly important miracle that Santa Muerte has worked for you? And so she told me, yeah, about 6 months ago, I was involved in a gang knife fight. And just as one of the rival gang members was about to thrust a 6-inch switchblade into my abdomen, Santa Muerte appeared as this kind of spectral figure, grabbed me by the arms and pulled me back, saving me from the switchblade. And so that's always remained with me, but those type of manifestations, kind of spectral manifestations, particularly for Mexican devotees, are really common currency. She
Really?
also appears to devotees in dreams a lot, and will give them advice or maybe warnings about something that they should avoid.
Do you have an example of that?
I can't think of any particular
Right off.
dream off the top of my head now, but yeah, that also is common currency.
Interesting.
I don't know. It just that reminded me fast of like Chorus Line, where the one woman is trying to become an actress, and they try to run her out of the acting class, and she goes to Santa Maria, and just prays to her, and then the answer comes to her. This man is no good, and you are good, and just ignore him and go on with your career. And she goes, "Thank you, thank you." But
Let me also say that a lot of devotees will tell you that their statues and their statuettes will turn their heads sometimes. They actually drink the tequila and water that's offered to them, and so they really view their effigies as animate.
Yeah, it just I think you find this type of religious belief throughout all cultures and ethnicities. I mean, I think it's just more a reflection of the human psychology more than an actual religious event. Don't you? I mean, for example, out in Iceland, where they carve elves onto rocks and then they leave cookies there for them, and then the cookies are eaten in the morning. But,
Yeah.
I mean, you hear these type of stories all over. We were looking for a real red-blooded miracle, like like the volcano went off and Santa Maria put a cork in it, or something of that nature.
Well,
Right. But there's also kind of class basis to this, because a lot of times for the more working classes, religion tends to be much more tangible. There's a lot of touching involved, and also much more utilitarian or pragmatically oriented. And so when I'm talking about matters of law and justice and love and health and wealth, it's because a lot of the devotees have hard lives.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're looking for quick and immediate solutions to things. And so it's very much kind of the opposite of what tends to be kind of a much more abstract and intellectualistic religious orientation of the elite of any given society.
well, I would tend to agree with you on that, Andrew, insofar as I think here in the northeast of the United States, and you're almost in the northeast of the United States, being there
Almost.
almost, you're just a little south of the Mason-Dixon line right now. But I think that there is worship of scientism and this kind of everything can be explained sort of headset, which does not exist south of the border. to any extent whatsoever, except, as you say, and maybe at the University of Mexico City or something. In my experiences in Brazil and in Panama and Mexico and a few other of the Latin American countries I've visited, is that there's still the same degree of belief in the supernatural and belief that matter can be compromised by consciousness. And frankly, although I may not agree with the particulars of that, I do agree in general that matter can be compromised by consciousness, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, sure. And you can even include the United States in that, because we're a much more religious country than Western Europe. I mean, Western Europe is kind of the greatest bastion of disbelief and secularism in the entire world. So even large swaths of the United States you can include in that.
That's true, actually. The whole Midwest.
I agree that the United States is a very religious country, but I don't know how much general America tends to believe that matter is compromised by consciousness. Just believing in a God, which you may petition or you may have certain rituals or beliefs around. The supernatural quality, I think, is stronger in the Latin American countries. I mean, maybe it's not true, but it seems that way to me.
I think because they still have a strong native culture underneath it. Our natives, unfortunately, that culture disappeared to a great extent. But I may be wrong, too.
Don't tell those people in the Southwest that.
No, you know what I'm saying.
No, I hear you. I'm just...
Because,
let me point out that, Pentecostalism, which is the great kind of spirit-centered Christianity, was born in the United States. And it's very much centered on being kind of possessed and given the gifts of the Holy Spirit. And that really quickly took off among African Americans in this country, and it's thriving in Brazil and the Caribbean and such too. So there still are very strong strains in the United States, maybe not to the extent as Latin America, but again, compared to Western Europe, I mean, we're religious fanatics.
Yes,
but a lot of the people on both coasts were basically, their religion did come from Western Europe. And so, it lacked that underlying supernatural quality. I mean, obviously, all religions have supernatural qualities, but I don't know what you're saying. It just seems more natural, more just stronger in other areas than we do. You have to convince people here that there are such things as ghosts or supernatural happenings, whereas I think in South America it's more or less accepted.
Yes.
I mean, look at UFOs. Everyone believes in UFOs in Mexico City, and here
Absolutely.
it's like...
And in Argentina and in
and
in
here
Brazil.
you have to... you come off as an idiot if you think you believe in UFOs, which of course is...
Although my parents used to live in New Mexico, and a lot of people there...
Oh, yeah. That's the heartland.
Right,
Yes.
exactly. Right.
Well, in New Mexico, it's hard to tell ours from theirs. In other words, there are a lot of military installations around that area that may be flying advanced craft.
All right, but you still have a lot of the American natives, like the various Indians in that area. And I mean, look at their religious things. They're largely supernatural. And I mean, yeah, they are... they do believe in deity. It's a whole different approach than Western religions. I'm telling you this. I mean, you're the professor.
I was fascinated. Over the weekend, I happened to stay at a hotel in Pennsylvania and opened the drawer to find, of course, Gideon's Bible, as in the Beatles song. But next to Gideon's Bible was the Book of Mormon.
Really?
And I almost fell over.
Oh.
I was so surprised.
Yeah.
But when you consider that the Mormon religion is founded on a certain amount of UFO lore.
Yeah, supernatural happenings.
And I don't know if you're staying in a Marriott, because the Marriott is owned by Mormons.
Right,
so-
Okay, there you go. That's the reason.
Right.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I didn't know that, Andrew.
That's quite
See?
correct.
Yes.
So,
But anyway, getting back to Santa Muerte.
Santa Muerte.
Yeah, okay. Mama
Saint
death.
Mama,
Yeah.
okay.
But, you can see that where it would come out of sort of people in the barrios of Mexico. I mean, their lives are desperate. And I would imagine, I mean, happily, I don't know for sure, but I mean, if your life is so miserable, you start to worship death. I mean, it seems like a relief,
Exactly, and I think it's really telling that the most popular Catholic saint in both Mexico and among Catholic Latinos in the United States is Saint Jude, who of course is the patron of lost causes.
Yeah.
Now I've found that a lot of Santa Muerte devotees in Mexico before were devotees of Saint Jude, and they would say, "Oh, I was asking Saint Jude for this favor for 3 months. He never came through. My aunt recommended that I check out Santa Muerte, and within 3 days, I got the new job that I was asking for." And so, if you can't get the patron saint of lost causes to come through you, then who else to go to? Well, Santa Muerte.
Well, what is the story with making a promise, and if you don't keep the promise, there could be dire results? Can you
that wouldn't be
fill us in on that?
Yeah. Actually, that also corresponds with Catholic saints as well. A lot of people will approach favors and asking for miracles of the Catholic saints in kind of a contractual relationship. Mm-hmm. Oh, Saint Jude, if you heal my daughter of her illness, then I will light 12 candles to you for 12 straight days. Now, if St. Jude comes through with a miracle and you don't fulfill your vow to light those candles, then even St. Jude might exact some type of retribution or punishment. Well, the same works with Santa Muerte, but of course, since she has the reputation of being so powerful and she has that larger-than-life scythe, then if you don't fulfill a vow that you made to her and she comes through on the miracle, then yeah, I mean, it's possible she might seek retribution. And kind of the myth that you'll hear in Mexico, particularly among non-believers, is that she actually might seek retribution in taking your entire family with her.
Ooh.
Oh, wow,
that's not good.
Quite something.
No, but of course, most devotees will tell you, that's not true. That's just lies spread by non-believers.
You know what Fahrusha was mentioning before was mind over matter, and how much of that, if you're that firm a believer in Santa Muerte, if you're that firm a believer, perhaps you yourself create your own miracles. I mean, that would be your take on it, right, Fahrusha?
My jury is out as to whether we are contacting our higher selves or a third party, and whether on some level, if we're all one, whether it actually matters.
Yeah.
I mean, it's beyond me in my human form to make a
you feel
final analysis.
that's
on
really possible. You have, let's say, 20 people really praying for something,
right?
And they're very serious. They really want this, and they're very sincere in their request. Do you think, Dr. Chesnut, that might have some sort of an effect on, other than a saint doing it for them, just the fact of, this psychic ability in humans to create things? To give you an example, like home team advantage in sports.
Yeah, that's a tough question because in my own research, I don't usually get into, explaining or analyzing the validity of miracles. I don't see it as my charge to kind of scientifically debunk miracles.
Right.
Well, that's not exactly debunking it.
No, it's not. It's not. But it's not really something that I get into this kind of genesis of miracles in my research. So I don't know. I guess I'd rather refrain from
Okay.
opining on that particular matter.
Well, the miracles, I mean, in terms of the Catholic Church, isn't it that there it has to go before a council of bishops and they decide whether it's a miracle or not, depending on certain things? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not a
Yeah.
Catholic scholar.
Yeah,
On the other hand,
yeah, particularly if somebody's being considered for beatification and canonization, yeah, they need proof of that. Yes.
So why do you think they'd object so much to Santa Muerte? Since you've, what's their objections there?
Yeah, there's two major reasons. First, there's competition.
Okay.
The Catholic Church in Mexico is the second largest in the world, second to Brazil's. And it's in decline, as all Catholic churches are throughout Latin America, which, of course, historically has been the most Catholic region on earth. And the most important reason they're in decline is because Pentecostalism, which I mentioned before, is surging throughout Latin America.
Wow.
So many Catholics have left the church to become Pentecostals. That's the main reason. So, for example, Brazil is now only 61% Catholic.
Wow.
And if the trend continues by 2030, Brazil, the largest Catholic nation on earth, will no longer be a Catholic majority nation. Mexico has held its own better, but it's still down to about 80% Catholic. And so Santa Muerte presents serious competition, particularly when most of the devotees are people who do identify as Catholics, yet most of them really are nominal or cultural Catholics who probably haven't set foot and haven't attended a Catholic Mass for many years. So there's competition, and there's also on the theological plane the argument that as a Christian, you should not be venerating a figure of death. If Jesus Christ came, sacrificed himself on the cross to give us the promise of eternal life, eternal salvation, then in a way, death is really the last enemy that was vanquished by Christ. And in venerating death, you're really venerating the antithesis of Christ. And so it's really tantamount to unintentional Satanism.
oh my.
Yeah, you're quite right.
My.
Wow.
Well, things seem to work pretty comfortably together in places in the Caribbean that have Santeria and their counterparts, with folk saints in that area. So I could see where people could both think of themselves as Catholic and also have a devotion to Santa Muerte.
Right, of course. Yeah, most Mexican devotees don't know that the church has condemned Santa Muerte, or they don't care because it kind of fits in with their kind of larger folk Catholic worldview. So yeah, I think the Vatican, and it really is extraordinary that Pope Francis condemned her, and actually one of his colleagues, Italian cardinal who's the president of the Pontifical Council of Culture, condemned Santa Muerte 3 years ago. He was in Mexico City for a visit, and on each of the 4 days he was in Mexico City, he condemned Santa Muerte by name. So, it's not every day that the Vatican is actually issuing condemnations of folk saints.
Yeah. Well, why? Oh, I was going to say, why did they? What reasons did they give? Did they have to give a reason, or did they just say, "I condemn you"?
Yeah. Well, they called her blasphemy.
Okay.
Anti-religion, and when the Pope was there in February, basically condemned her as kind of what did he call her? The macabre symbol of narcos, of drug traffickers.
Oh.
Well, Andrew, I am something of a devotee of another folk saint that was condemned by the Catholic Church, and I don't know if you're familiar with her. But she wouldn't go away, and she just kept coming back, so much so that they had to install her in the Cathedral of Chartres in France, and that's Notre Dame sous terre. Are you familiar with her?
I am.
And I am, I went over there and I spent a lot of time in the crypt with her, where she's underneath the earth, and they couldn't keep her down. Or the Black Isis
Right.
of Poland, you know, the Black Madonna,
Right.
which was Isis, an Isis statue. And I don't have no relationship to the disgusting, immoral beasts in the Middle East that dare to
Sure,
use her
sure.
name,
No, but
and they will be
that-
punished for using her name. I tell you.
That's a good example because that is a good example because over the centuries there have been kind of folk saints who have been incorporated and canonized, but I can firmly guarantee that that's never ever going to happen with Santa Muerte.
Yeah.
So, what is your next project?
And actually, I think we should announce your book at this time.
Yes, you
too,
should
know?
announce your book, Andrew.
Please.
Yeah. My book is called "Devoted to Death: Santa Muerte's Skeleton Saint." Was published by Oxford University Press, 2012, and so actually right now I'm writing the new edition, the second edition, which should be out mid 2017. So that's what I'm working on now. And then when I'm done with that, I'll probably move on to a second book on Santa Muerte because there's so many themes I haven't covered. Like, her name also means holy death. And this concept of having a good death or a holy death in a Mexico beset by so much bad death is really powerful as well. And that's not a theme that I really work too much in Devoted to Death. So she's also grown a lot among African Americans and Euro Americans here in the United States. I'm on 4 or 5 Facebook pages of devotees who are almost exclusively white Americans. So I want to write about her kind of surging popularity among African and Euro Americans. So
Interesting.
A lot of themes that I haven't touched on yet. I'd like to explore in the near future.
So a lot of people obviously are buying your books that are interested in this. Until Fahrusha brought it up, I had actually never even heard of it. So
Yeah. I mean, again, I don't really talk about competition. I don't have any because 4 years later, it's the only study in English. So,
Wow.
For an academic book, it's done very well.
How about in Mexico and
it was published in Mexico 2 years ago, and also published in Poland last year.
Poland?
Yep.
Fascinating.
Why Poland?
An occult press that was interested. Yeah, I was thinking, wow, Poland is really the last bastion of Catholicism in Europe, yet there it is in Polish as well.
Well, that's wonderful, Andrew.
Yeah, in fact, I'll also be giving 3 book talks in London in early July, so I'm looking forward to that as well.
And what type of people do you find in the audience?
Well, in London, there'll probably be neo-pagans, university people, goths, maybe people with an interest in Latin America. And then, and when I go to New York, I've spoke at Morbid Anatomy 2 times already. And so, kind of the whole, Brooklyn hipster crowd shows up with these types of things.
Well, I hope to see you there.
I hope so.
On May 30th.
It's on Memorial Day.
So we want to thank you very, very much for joining us here on Shattered Reality.
Especially on my part, because I had never heard of any of this, so it's all brand new. Thank you so much.
It's really been wonderful speaking with you, and we hope that perhaps you'll join us again, particularly when you come out with your second edition.
Oh, I'd love to. It's been a great pleasure, and I really thank you for the wonderful, incisive questions as well.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to say goodbye to you and move on to the end part of the show, where we had a very nice letter. We had asked our listeners to perhaps give us some accounts of events with pets, psychic events with pets. I don't think experiences with pets. And so I don't know, since this letter was really written by somebody who is a particular fan of yours, Kate, and formerly the Kate Valentine UFO show, perhaps you would like to read what our listeners said.
Certainly, Fahrusha. Okay, so the listener wrote in, I've never left a comment before, but I love the show. You both have a wonderful way with guests and with the making the subject matter understandable. I feel a very strong bond with animals and nature for various reasons and have had a number of unusual, in quotes, experiences. One that stands out involved my dog Wiley, who Kate may remember, and yes, I do. He used to lay at the top of my basement stairs while I cleaned the cat litter boxes and watch me. One week, after I had to put him down due to cancer, and that was sad. Anyway, I was in the basement and happened to glance at the stairs. There was Wiley hanging his head over the top stair, watching me as usual. I turned away, thinking nothing of it, and then realized, wait, that can't be. When I looked again, there was nothing there. I guess it can be explained away as simply a type of photographic memory, and yet I know it was more than that. I think he was checking to make sure I kept my promise to him to rescue another dog, LOL, which I did, and that involves another whole series of coincidences. Thanks again for the great show, and keep up the good work. Well, thank you so much for such a lovely letter.
Yes, it was very nice to receive that account of a psychic pet experience. And
just recently there was a talk show host that was talking about the relationship between humans and dogs and how, obviously it's a close bond and we do have other pets, but there's something a little bit closer, a little bit more attuned to humans with dogs than with any other species, I think. I think, anyway, that's...
Well, I've had a couple of dogs, and I felt very, very close to them, 3 dogs in all in my life. But as you know, I'm a cat owner, and I feel very, very close to some of my cats. Some of my cats that I've had over the course of time, and I am as much their servant as vice versa, certainly.
Dogs have owners, cats have staff.
That's right. I'm the cat staff.
Right.
But some of them seem to be more involved with human interaction than others.
Yeah, but cats don't hunt with you. Dogs do. Cats don't really watch the front door. Dogs do. Cats may sleep at the pillow, but that's only because they allow you there. Whereas the dog sort of hangs out and looks around. I don't know. I just feel that there's more of a human-dog interaction than human-cat. There obviously there's a human-cat interaction as well, but it's a different type.
Well, you've had both at the same time more often than myself, so I will defer to your
And then there
expertise.
was the bird, too, which is another whole thing.
Well, birds are amazing, the way they pick out colors, and they're so smart, the crows and so forth. But, yes,
we did.
listeners,
Yes.
please send us your experiences, and maybe if you'd like to be on at the end of the show recounting your experience yourself, that can be arranged. And so I'd just like to take this moment to thank Mr. Bill, our wonderful sound engineer, and just a nod to Nate Duffy, who recorded our intro, which we still use and very much appreciate.
Absolutely.
So thanks to both of those guys. And
I guess, is this a wrap?
it's a wrap, I
Okay,
think. So
all right.
shall we say goodbye, Kate?
Okay, goodbye, Fahrusha.
From Shattered Reality Podcast.